Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about a really important topic for me and one that's very important to me personally. And at the end, I'm going to share a bit of something very personal that I think really makes this topic very real, and it shows you you know, how it's an ongoing thing for me, an ongoing area of growth in my life. So let's get right into the topic of fearlessness and living fearlessly.
This is a Deep Psychology podcast. I'm your host, Ross Edwards, writer, meditation teacher, founder of deep-psychology.com, and avid lover of all things psychological. In listening to this podcast, you're part of the worldwide deep psychology community of tens of thousands of people undertaking profound personal transformation. You can join us on any of the major podcasting platforms, and make sure to visit the site deep-psychology.com for lots of high quality resources. Let's get started.
So this topic came to me because actually very recently I was in a coffee shop on my own reading a book. I was reading a book actually about enlightenment, about spiritual enlightenment, and the section of the book was written by Evelyn Underhill, who was a very influential writer in the early 20th century, woman writer, writing about mysticism, writing about the great saints and sages of the past, and sort of going into their lives and talking about how did the realization of enlightenment change their lives, and how did that affect their behavior and their actions in the world. And her conclusion, one of the conclusions that really struck me, which is very interesting and which actually perpetuated this entire realization that I had about my life, which I'm going to go into in a minute. She was basically saying that when the great saints and sages came to their deep realizations about God and about their own identity with God and their inseparability from God, they gained a huge inner strength, and they were able to do some amazing things. Like think of Saint Teresa, think of Joan of Arc, for example, think of Saint Paul. These well-known figures, spiritual figures, were able to do things that the average person couldn't do. And they weren't in terms of money and finances, they were not in privileged positions. They were, a lot of the times they had very little money, very, very little financial resources. But what seemed to drive them on, in her opinion, was their knowledge of God and their knowledge of their inseparability from God. And that ultimately became the greatest source of their power. And that was what drove them to do amazing things. So she discusses this quite at length in her work, and I would really recommend her work. It's very interesting. And as I was sitting there reading about these people and reading about the sort of things they were able to do, it sort of made me look at myself it made me very aware of my own psychology right there when I was sitting in the cafe. And I could sort of, for the first time in my life, I got this very clear sense that for much of my life, and listen, I've achieved a lot in my life, I think. And there's been many times in my life where I've achieved things that I really didn't think I was capable of. And it took me many years of persistence to achieve them. But even then, I still think like my overall disposition to life has been, and this is where it comes in relevant to this episode, has been one of being fearful of many. It's not just being fearful either. There's sort of many different facets to my psychology that I realized. One of the greatest things I realized was the internal resistance I have to life. And the way that this showed up for me was that life is always asking things of me, from very small things to very big things. Like when I receive a phone call, that is me being asked to do something. I'm being asked to pick up the phone and speak to someone and listen to what they have to say, and then, respond appropriately, whether that's just words or whether that's with an action of some kind. I'm being asked to do something. Or maybe, the car is broken and it needs to be taken to the garage. Well, that's another thing that life asks us to do very often. Maybe the dishes need done. That's something else that life is asking us to do. Or on a bigger level, maybe life is asking us to change our career. Maybe life is asking us to change family. Maybe our life is asking us to go and visit a new country. These bigger things as well. And everything in between, everything related to family and friends and your possessions and your work and your play and whatever, life is always asking things of you. And I realized that this is how it works for the first time. And depends on how you understand these things, you can think of it in a sort of physical, spiritual way. You can think of it as in a more kind of mundane way. Not that the two are separate, but however way you sort of conceptualize it, life is asking things of us. We are being asked to do things all the time. And I don't just mean by our boss. I mean just we have things to attend to. And I noticed just at that moment right there when I was reading this book, I noticed that my fundamental disposition to everything I'm being asked for or being asked to do is basically one of resistance, as I said. One of resistance. It's like often when something happens in my life and it requires me to do something, this is when I'm going to sound very lazy. It's like my immediate response to that is not to want to do it. It's just like, I just don't want to do it. There's like an immediate resistance. It's like an immediate reaction from within is like, no. Just leave me alone. Like, I just want to be left alone in my own little world. I just want to sit and read my book. I just want to chill out. I just want to relax. Just leave me alone. You take care of it. Or, even if I do it, and I've been guilty of this in so many areas of life that it would take a very long time for me to list them all out, is to do them basically half-ass it. It's like I'll do it and I'll feel like I'm taking responsibility and I'm getting it done, but actually there's a lot of resistance when I'm doing it because I'm still there sort of fighting it. I know that I'm going to do it, but I'm fighting it so much that actually I'm not really doing it properly. I end up doing it, as I said, half-assed because I just don't want to be doing it, and I just can't I can't see the resistance and I can't work around the resistance because it's just there all the time. That was one thing that became very obvious to me in that moment, was just my fundamental disposition to life is one of resistance, but there's also a fear. Because I've noticed it's generated this underlying fear in me of being asked to do things, and I don't know if I'm capable of doing them. Because if I'm walking around resisting all the time and not wanting people to ask me things or not wanting to get involved in things, inevitably it turns into like a very pervasive sense of fear. It's a fear of being asked to do things, of being asked to show up in the world. And this is where the theme of fearlessness comes in. I also noticed I'm quite a fearful person in a way that I couldn't have understood it conceptually. It needed this like bright spark of inspiration from this book that I got to show me my psychology for myself and to see how very subtly I'm afraid of a lot of things. Like, on a very subtle level, even when I was in the coffee shop, it's like asking for another coffee or asking for a piece of cake or asking to, that I can pay the bill. It's just like these little things. It's like every action has its little bit of fear in it for me. And on a bigger level, this translates into not doing what I should be doing in the world. Like, I feel like I'm a very capable person, the problem is with me is that, again, I've got this resistance and I've got this fear. And ultimately I'm seeing the fear, I'm buying into the fear, I'm seeing the limitations, I'm seeing the possible areas of failure too much. I'm not taking action, and I'm just not being present. Like, when there's fear, this is one thing you have to realize about fear, is that when there is fear, there is automatically you are projecting into the future based on past experiences, based on your judgments, based on your ideas of the project you're undertaking, the task you're undertaking. You're projecting into the future based on your ideas. And I'm not saying that your future ideas are always wrong. The problem is if you don't see them for what they are, they really do inhibit you. They stop you. They stop you from being in the moment and doing the thing that needs to be done in the moment. You're not in your present experience, you're in your future. You're in your imaginations of the future. And you're not here living. You're not alive. You're not alive to what is being asked of you. You're buying into your fear. This is another one of the things I realized. And I also realized that the theme of fearlessness, and it was probably because I was reading this book and Evelyn Underhill was talking about this topic from this angle. It's a very spiritual part of an authentic spiritual life, in my opinion, is a decrease in your fear. Because one way you can look at fear is that fear is based on separation. It's based on, I am here and the world is there. This is me, this is my body, this is my mind, and the world is outside of me. And when you develop spiritual awareness, spiritual consciousness, when you work, when you do meditation, for example, on a regular basis, you start to realize that that isn't actually true at all. That life is in you. You are life. Life is in you. Everything you are feeling, experiencing, seeing, hearing, thinking, perceiving on any level is within your awareness, your direct awareness. And there is nothing outside your direct awareness. And so think about this. If you have an idea of something and you have a fear towards it, you have a resistance towards it, that automatically defines that event for you, because you cannot look at that event outside of your direct perception. Your direct perception of it and your ideas about it is the event. That's all that exists for you in terms of that event. And so if you're caught in the separation between the event and yourself and you're judging it, then effectively you're going to be stuck in a fear mindset with that event. Now, the difference with spiritual awareness is that you realize that there is no difference between the event and you and your life. It is you, it is your life right now as it is. And you realize that there is nothing else. This is your life. And your life is ultimately divine and all-encompassing, and it is a work of art. It's a dance. It's like a play. And I've noticed that when I resist, when I fear, I'm not trusting. I'm not aware of my bigger identity. I'm not realizing that I am actually, there is nothing outside of me. And so how can I fear it? Because it's within me. Even if I feel the fear is also within me. My own perceptions are within me. There's nothing outside me imposing anything on me. It's up to me to stand up, to feel my power, to feel my spiritual power, to feel my divine power, to tap into that and to manifest it, and to stand up and show it, breathe it in, and stand tall and make it, bring that forth into the world. And that's the other thing I realized about fear and fearlessness, is that part of when we're being asked to do things in life, a lot of them we're already used to them. So I can quite easily go to the fridge and get something to eat. That's no problem for me. It doesn't create fear. Or I can quite easily, go to bed at night. That doesn't create fear. It's something I need to do on a regular basis to get sleep, but it's not something I'm afraid of. However, there are other things that I'm being asked to do all the time that I am afraid of, like phone calls. That's one of the biggest things in my life that I struggle with is just phone calls. And it sounds really silly, but that's what it is. Now, what I was shown was that these aren't things being imposed on me from the outside. I can see them as just events that I am not separate from, and that they're there as a growth mechanism. And that is what makes me grow, is when I respond to these things. Obviously, when you're making a phone call, you're literally responding. But responding to what is being asked of me is a growth process, because when you feel that fear, you're being asked to do something, you feel the fear inside you and you respond and you act. You don't push it away, you don't say no, you don't shun responsibility, you don't hide away. When you take it on and you feel the fear and you realize you are bigger than the fear, that you are much bigger than the fear, your body, your mind, everything is much bigger than that fear. You start to transcend that fear. You start to go beyond it. And when you repeatedly do the same things over and over again, you start to not fear them anymore. So it's the act itself of saying yes is a fear-reducing act, because the fear is often in just the resistance to it. It's not in the act itself. When you respond and you say yes and you say, I'm going to do this, you're sort of going beyond the fear, even before you've maybe even done what needs to be done. You're already going beyond the fear, because you've already accepted the challenge. And then the more you do that with the same sort of experience over and over again, in my case, phone calls, you realize that you train yourself to realize that there is nothing to be afraid of fundamentally. You work through all these old patterns and you start to reprogram it. It's no longer, blind conditioning, like the Pavlov's dog reacting. It's not me automatically feeling fear because a phone call is coming. It's just like, oh, I've done this before, let me do it. Let me pick up the phone. And so that's one of the key insights I had, is that fear is necessary. Well, the fear maybe isn't necessary, but we are going to be asked to do things. Some of them will make us afraid. And when we act on it, we grow as people. And that is one of the main mechanisms by which we grow. Whereas if we just say no all the time to everything that scares us, we're not going to grow, because we're not integrating new experiences. We're not changing our psyche. We're not changing how we view ourselves, view the world. We're not working through our old traumas. And so we're just stuck in that same old identity. And so after this, so that's just a sort of short summary of everything that I realised when I was sitting in this coffee shop reading this book. There's more to it, and a lot of this stuff is very hard to describe, because it wasn't just like a mental thing, it was a very physical thing. It involved like a certain shift in perception, in awareness, that I can't really describe very well. But that's a nice summary of it. And basically what I did after that was I went on a very long walk, probably about 2 hours. I was walking. And I was just talking to myself, and it was mostly sort of being firm, being loving, but being very firm. And saying to myself, Ross, you're better than this. You're better than being stuck in this fear. You're better than saying no. You're better than, playing victim. You're better than blaming people. You don't have to do all this. You have to take the high road. You have to trust in your divineness, your divinity, your divine power. And you have to say yes to life. You have to take everything on as a challenge. You have to see it as you're being called to do things all the time, And whether you say yes or no, that defines you, it defines your life, it defines who you are, it defines your psychology. And one of the other things I've realised, and this is sort of a broad, big, high-level philosophical generalisation, is that when we say no to life, we are not alive. We are just, we're sort of stagnating. We're remaining still, like a river that gets stuck, and the river stops moving, and you start getting all kinds of algae and bacteria, and the water goes brown and it goes smelly, and no one wants to go in there. No fish can survive in there. That's what happens to our psychology and to our personality and to our life if we don't flow with life, and we don't say yes, and we don't keep ourselves open. We stagnate, and years go by. We've got the same old fears. We do the same old things in the same old way. We resist the same things. We live our little loops, our comfort loops, the things we're comfortable with. We just live them over and over again because we know how to do them. It's like riding a bike. We just keep riding the same bike over and over and over again, and nothing really happens. And that is one of the beautiful things about life, is that it's a challenge. Life is a challenge. We're constantly being asked to do challenging things. Depends on what sort of life situation we have, on our career, on our family, on all kinds of other factors. But I believe on some level we are all being challenged every single day to do things that we don't really want to do. But feeling alive is taking on the challenge, breathing it in, feeling big, taking it on, seeing the fear, feeling the fear, but not buying into it. And that's when we feel most alive. When we feel ourselves growing, we feel ourselves being nourished. Even if, for a few hours or a few days we feel scared and nervous about it, we ultimately grow, we learn, and that's when we're most alive. And it's interesting because you might think, oh, well, this is just a philosophy. This is just psychology. This is just like a theoretical thing, right? Well, no, because I've not had like the same sort of eye-opening perception throughout the whole week. No, because I've got things to get done, and frankly, it's hard to see these deeper things a lot of the time. But I've reminded myself all the time not to resist. Not to see my resistance, not to buy into it, to see my fears, to see the things I don't want to do and do them. And yes, this has involved answering the phone. I've probably answered triple the amount of phone calls I usually would. This includes doing things around the house, little things here and there that maybe not that the house is like super messy or anything, but just little things here and there. Maybe there's some clothes that need folded up. Maybe there's dishes that need done. And instead of resisting it and saying, blah, 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 and sort of going into victim mode and acting like a little boy, which I do, I say yes and I say, no, let's get it done. Another example is saying no to people and asking them to change their behaviour when it's annoying me. A lot of the time in the past, I've been very kind of, if someone was behaving in a certain way, I would just sort of sit there and moan about it in my mind, and I'd feel sort of like angry towards them. I'd be sitting there saying all these things about them in my mind, and I'd be there sort of stirring up this inner story and this inner turmoil about it, but I wouldn't say anything. And I've noticed on a couple of occasions this week, there's been something happening, and I've needed to tell someone that it's not working for me. It's not working. And literally a week, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, I wouldn't have said anything to them, but I've said it to them. And I didn't want to. I could see my resistance and I resisted it a lot. But then I said, no, this is no way to live life. I need to say what needs to be said. So I did it. And it's worked. See, this is the thing about responding. Everything is inside of us. Other people are part of us. And so if they're doing something that we don't like, part of that is the fact, part of the process of that is us being asked to change it, to ask them to change, to show them a better way, to ask them to behave in a better way. It's part of the event. It's not something that we have to, it's not something that we're necessarily creating. And it's not something that we have to resist or deny. It's a reasonable expectation to have. And we're being asked to do it. It's like something we're being asked to do, right? And so that's when we have to step up. And I've seen that I've been able to step up that much more. And it's very interesting because I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but basically someone very close to me fell and broke a bone this week. And what has happened to me, I've had to do a lot of things I ordinarily would not want to do. I've had to look after them. I've had to make phone calls. I've had to, take charge of all the dinners, all the housework. I've not been able to work as much because I've had to take care of them. All this stuff that I would have normally resisted. I've felt the resistance. I've seen the resistance. And I've said, no, that is no way to live life. There's no way to live life to buy into resistance. And it's no way to look after this person. I need to be available. I need to respond to what is happening here. And so even in this very short time, it's had a lot of very practical implications for my life. And that's the main thing I want to get across here, is the idea of responding to life, seeing your resistance and just working through it, and realizing that life is on the other side of resistance. It's no way to live by resisting life and fearing things and playing victim and so on. It's our job to respond to life, and ultimately to realize that it's not mundane. All these little things that might seem mundane, it's actually part of our divine journey. It's part of our healing process. It's part of our growth process. It's part of our refining process. It's part of us being sort of sculpted into better people. Is to feel our fear and to work through our fear at whatever level that may show up. Okay, so I think that's enough about that. What I want to share just as I go, and this will be sort of the final thing that I say, is my declaration. After all of this, a few days after sort of thinking about this a bit more, thinking about my life and so on, I made a list of things that I wanted to say goodbye to and things that I wanted to welcome in. So to finish off, I'm going to read that. Before I do that, just want to say thank you for joining me. I'm going to have new episodes every week. Please subscribe, whatever platform you're on, leave a review or a comment, depends on what platform you're on. And I look forward to seeing you again soon for more topics like this. Visit deep-psychology.com for lots of free resources on all kinds of topics related to psychology, spirituality, meditation, and so on. All right, I'm Ross. Take care. My declaration for a new life. I'm done with moaning, victimhood, fear, excuses, negativity, limitations, shunning responsibility, laziness, aloneness, isolation, giving up, pessimism, indecision, fatigue, indifference, blaming, repression, separation, sensitivity, insincerity, hiding away, rigidity. And I bring forth passion, purpose, action, socializing, energy, tirelessness, willingness, openness, unicity, divinity, confidence, power, optimism, reintegration, transformation, presence, sincerity, trust, creation.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email me at ross@deep-psychology.com. If you'd like to go deeper, head to deep-psychology.com for articles, courses, ebooks, and one-to-one coaching. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.